What happens when a voice born in silence is suddenly heard by the whole world? What happens when a dream, carried quietly for years, finally dares to breathe in front of millions? Far from the glow of American television lights, there was once a small home in the Philippines where music lived softly. Not loudly. Not confidently. But patiently. Inside that home lived Eli Navarro, a young man with gentle eyes and a careful heart. He was the kind of person who spoke less and listened more. Life had taught him to be quiet early. Responsibility arrived before comfort, and dreams learned to hide behind duty. Music was not a career for him. It was survival. It was the one place where pain could rest without asking questions. Every evening, after long days filled with uncertainty, Eli would sing alone. Not for applause. Not for attention. Only to feel whole again. His voice carried echoes of an era he never lived in, yet somehow understood deeply. An old sound. A timeless feeling. His mother, Luz Navarro, was the silent witness to this gift. A strong woman shaped by sacrifice, she carried hope quietly, just like her son. She never pushed him toward the spotlight. She only believed when belief was hard. There was also Marco Reyes, a childhood friend with restless energy and unshakable faith. Where Eli doubted, Marco reminded. Where fear whispered, Marco stood firm. But belief does not erase fear. And dreams do not erase reality. The world Eli knew was small. America was not a place, it was a distant idea. A screen. A promise that felt too large for someone who had spent years being invisible. Yet something stirred beneath the doubt. A question that refused to sleep. What if the voice that healed him could heal others? What if silence was not where his story ended, but where it began? That night, as Eli stood alone under a dim light, singing not louder but deeper, the moment arrived quietly. Not as certainty. But as courage. Because sometimes, the greatest journeys begin not with confidence. But with a single, trembling belief that maybe, just maybe, the world is ready to listen. Dreams rarely arrive with clarity. Most of the time, they come disguised as restlessness, as an ache that refuses to leave. For Eli Navarro, that ache followed him through ordinary days and sleepless nights, growing heavier with each passing year. Life did not pause to make space for music. Bills arrived. Responsibilities stacked quietly on his shoulders. There were moments when the dream felt selfish, almost childish, compared to the weight of survival. So Eli learned to set his voice aside, folding it carefully into the corners of his life, promising himself he would return to it someday. That someday kept moving. Rejection became familiar. Small auditions that led nowhere. Opportunities that faded before they fully formed. Each disappointment did not shatter him loudly, it wore him down slowly. Doubt crept in softly, asking if talent was enough, or if dreams belonged only to those born closer to the spotlight. America still felt unreal. A place that existed on screens and stories, far beyond his reach. The idea of standing on a stage there felt almost absurd, like dreaming of touching the stars from the ground. Yet there were moments that refused to let him quit. His mother, Luz, never asked him to stop dreaming. She never asked him to chase it either. Her belief showed itself in quiet sacrifices, in understanding silences, in the way she listened as if every song mattered. Marco, his friend, remained relentless. When Eli's faith weakened, Marco's voice grew stronger. He spoke of chances, of risks, of doors that only opened once. He reminded Eli that some regrets last longer than failure. Then came the opportunity, unexpected, fragile, and terrifying. An audition that demanded more than talent. It demanded courage. The application form sat untouched for days. Fear wrapped itself around every question. What if he wasn't enough? What if the world heard him and turned away? But something had changed. The years of silence had shaped his voice, not weakened it. The pain had given it depth. The waiting had given it purpose. When Eli finally pressed submit, there was no celebration. Only a quiet breath. Because the road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time, he had chosen the dream over the doubt. And somewhere far away, an impossible stage was waiting. The stage felt larger than anything Eli Navarro had ever imagined. Light stretched above him like an unfamiliar sky, bright and unforgiving. Every step forward carried the weight of years, of waiting, of fear, of quiet hope that had survived despite everything. As he stood there, the noise of the room faded into something distant. The crowd was present, yet unreachable. In that moment, he was no longer thinking of America, or judgment, or what this could become. He was thinking of home. Of late nights filled with soft singing. Of a dream that had grown stronger in silence. Then came the first note. It did not arrive with force. It arrived with honesty. The sound carried something rare, an emotion that felt both old and new. It was not imitation. It was remembrance. A voice shaped by hardship, carrying a warmth that cut through expectation. The room began to change. Faces that had held curiosity slowly shifted into disbelief. Movement stopped. Whispers disappeared. A stillness settled over the space, heavy and sacred. America froze. The voice filled the room, steady and vulnerable at once. Each note carried weight, not just of music, but of experience. It felt as if a forgotten feeling had been invited back, gently but undeniably. Time stretched. Seconds felt longer. Breaths were held without realizing why. Eli no longer saw the lights. He no longer felt the stage beneath his feet. He was no longer performing. He was offering something deeply personal to people he had never met. As the song unfolded, emotion traveled freely, moving from the stage to the seats, from one heart to another. The voice did not ask for approval. It asked for connection. And connection is powerful. When the final note approached, the silence grew even deeper. Not empty. Full. In that suspended moment, the room understood something together. This was more than a performance. More than talent. It was a reminder. That music can cross oceans. That pain can become beauty. That one honest voice, born far from the spotlight, can stop an entire nation from moving, if only for a moment. The final note faded slowly, as if it didn't want to leave the room. It hung in the air, gentle and heavy at the same time. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence that followed was not empty, it was alive. Eli Navarro stood still at the center of the stage. His chest rose and fell as he caught his breath, unsure of what the quiet meant. He had given everything he carried inside. There was nothing left to hold back. For a brief moment, the world seemed to pause. Then the impact arrived, not as noise, but as emotion. Faces in the audience softened. Some eyes glistened. Others stared forward, overwhelmed by feelings they did not expect to feel. It was as if the performance had unlocked something deeply human, something long buried beneath routine and noise. This was not admiration. It was recognition. Eli began to understand that the dream had never truly been about winning or being seen. It was about being felt. About allowing his voice to speak where words could not. The judges, known for their restraint and control, sat differently now. Their expressions carried weight. They were no longer measuring technique or style. They were absorbing a moment they knew could not be recreated. Across the country, living rooms fell quiet. People leaned closer to their screens, sensing that they were witnessing something rare. A performance that asked nothing and gave everything. Eli felt something shift inside him. The fear that had followed him for years loosened its grip. The doubt that had whispered so loudly finally grew quiet. In its place came gratitude. Not pride. Not relief. Gratitude for the journey. For the silence that shaped him. For the pain that gave his voice depth. As applause finally rose, it felt secondary to what had already happened. The true exchange had taken place in the stillness. The room had not just heard a song. It had shared an emotion. And in that shared silence, Eli realized something profound. Sometimes, the loudest impact a person can make does not come from sound at all, but from the truth they are brave enough to reveal. The moment did not end when the lights dimmed or the cameras turned away. It followed Eli Navarro quietly, settling into his life the way music always had, softly, deeply, and without demand. In the days that followed, the world seemed different. Not louder. Not faster. Just more aware. Messages arrived from places Eli had only ever seen on maps. Strangers spoke of memories awakened, of loved ones remembered, of hope restored. They did not talk about technique or perfection. They talked about how they felt. Back home, in the small neighborhood where his journey began, the television glowed late into the night. His mother, Luz, watched in silence, her strength finally allowing itself to rest. The years of quiet belief had found their answer, not in fame, but in meaning. Marco watched too, with a smile that carried relief more than pride. The dream they once spoke about in uncertain whispers had crossed an ocean and returned stronger. Eli understood now that the voice he once thought was his alone had grown beyond him. It belonged to those who saw their own struggles reflected in his story. To those who had been overlooked. To anyone who had ever been told their dream was too far away. America had not just listened. It had opened its heart. The Filipino dream and the American dream met in a place deeper than opportunity. They met in emotion. In shared humanity. Eli did not feel above anyone. He felt connected. Grounded by the knowledge that his journey mattered because it reminded others of their own strength. Music remained what it had always been, a bridge. Not a destination. And somewhere, in a quiet room much like the one where he once sang alone, another unseen dreamer listened. They heard not just a voice, but a possibility. The story did not end with applause. It continued in courage, in kindness, in belief renewed. Because sometimes, it only takes one honest voice. Born in silence, shaped by struggle. To remind a nation, and the world, that hope still knows how to sing. Far from the stage, in a place untouched by bright lights, Luz Santos sat quietly in a small room that felt suddenly too still. The television screen glowed softly, casting shadows on familiar walls. She did not sit comfortably. She leaned forward, as if distance could be crossed by hope alone. Her son stood where she once feared he never would. As Miguel's voice filled the room, Luz felt time collapse. She no longer saw the stage. She saw a little boy singing to himself, careful not to be heard. She saw nights spent counting coins, deciding what could wait until tomorrow. Every note carried memory. Not just Miguel's, but hers. She remembered mornings that began before sunrise. Work that left her hands sore and her body tired. Dreams she placed aside without regret. Because love had made the choice for her. Luz had never asked for recognition. She did not need applause. She measured success in quieter ways. Warm meals, safe nights, small joys. Now, as the song continued, something deep within her released. Years of worry softened into pride. Sacrifice transformed into meaning. This moment was not about fame. It was proof that nothing had been wasted. On the screen, Miguel stood steady. But Luz saw the journey behind that stillness. Every tear swallowed. Every fear endured. As the final note faded, she placed her hand over her chest. Not to calm herself, but to hold the feeling. Her sacrifice had found its voice. And somewhere across the world, without words, a mother understood that love, when given freely, always finds a way to sing.